Hello again. Welcome to week 7. We're going to look at Rousseau and Clausewitz and their understanding of war and, of course, the state. So we're going to look at a couple of concepts: the the social contract, Clausewitz on war, Rousseau on liberty, and the general will. And so these will come into play for the the final. So let's explore Rousseau's work. And what you need to know, what you need to remember is what a social contract is. And we talked about the social contract last lecture. That's with Locke and Hobbes. But Rousseau has his own understanding of the social contract. And that's a covenant or an agreement with which a person enters into the wider civil society. So, as an individual, you are bound to a community, and that community exists for its preservation, and that includes the individual within that. And so, as individuals, when we enter into civil society, you have to make certain choices, specifically sacrifices. So you can't do the things that you want to do. So your physical freedom is going to have to be sacrificed. You can't do everything that you want. You can't kill people. And so to gain that security, you're going to have to act a certain way, rationally and morally. And Rousseau says that by only entering into the social contract can we become fully human. So we leave our animal side, our uncivilized aspects about ourselves aside, and we enter into civilized or civil society. And so freedom is great. We all love freedom, but it is a motivating force behind entering the social contract. So when we have this complete freedom, we are not restrained in any way. And so when we enter into that social contract, we have to make certain choices, and that freedom is reduced by an agreement not to harm our fellow citizens, and at the same time other people can't harm us. And so civil freedom is definitely superior to this complete natural animalistic freedom, because as individuals we are slaves to our impulses, which may or may not be good for the society. And so we have to reduce that. Like Hobbes, we have Rousseau has the idea of the sovereign, and this is the law, the absolute authority within the state. And so the sovereign is an absolute monarch sometimes, but it also can be a healthy republic. And the citizen is sovereign, and the collective citizen, the citizen acting collectively, is the sovereign. And this is what Rousseau calls a general will, which we'll define shortly. The government is simply an apparatus where the day-to-day governing, issues are done. So this is day-to-day stuff, the bureaucracy part of it, getting a driver's license, national defense, everything like that. And so the government is essential in creating this sort of healthy civil society, and it represents the people. The government is not the people, though. The civil society and the general will, that's separate. And so sometimes the general will and the government is at odds. And this friction between the state and, this friction between the government and the people can sometimes cause conflict. What is a general will? I keep saying that the general will is the will that aims toward the common good. And so the general will is an expressed of what is best for the state as a whole. And so when we think about the U.S.'s general will, we think of freedom of speech, freedom of movement, and so forth. And this is a good thing, what individuals can all get behind. Each individual has his own particular will and what's best for him, but in general, generally speaking, it's the expression of what the collective wants. And what is the state of nature for Rousseau? That is about what human life would be like without the shaping influence of society. So naturally, what are people like? And Hobbes says something different. Locke says something different. Rousseau says something different. Human nature is fundamentally a product of what the philosopher describes it as such. So some philosophers say that it's a product of society, the social construction. Others say we're naturally evil. Others say that we can be good if we're giving good laws. And so remember that for your final exam. The common good is what is in the best interest of society as a whole. And so that's some of the concepts that you can see in the Rousseau reading. I just wanted to break that down for you. When you do the reading, you can really quite understand it. And so why did I link this up with war? Because war is politics by violent means, according to Clausewitz. And it's an expression in politics is sometimes the expression of the general will of the people, according to Rousseau. And so for Clausewitz, war is a continuation of politics by other means. War is still here. We still fight wars. And that's because war is a political instrument, according to Clausewitz. So the object of war is to force your opponent to submit to your will. In many ways, you can negotiate. You can ask your opponent, well, can you please stop amassing troops on the border? Sometimes the opponent will not. So maybe you can buy them off. Maybe you can buy your opponent and say, hey, I'll give you $1 billion if you move away from my border. If that fails, then you can put sanctions. But if your opponent fails to adjust its behavior, then war becomes essential. And so it's a political instrument. States don't fight wars because they feel like it. It's not an end in itself. War is the means, and the means must always include the object in our conception. What does that mean? That war has a political end. It is an act of violence intended to compel our opponent to fulfill our will. It's basically a duel on an extensive scale. There's two people who have an opposing viewpoint or whatnot. There's a conflict of interest, and that interest is political. And so you can try to convince your opponent to stop it, but when that fails, war is essential in that it can compel your opponent to fulfill your will. And so people argue that war is like uncivilized, and we can kind of moderate or regulate war, but ultimately, according to Clausewitz, this is foolish. It's absurd. We have to understand that war is a part of the human existence. According to Clausewitz, it's motivated by men. Men sometimes feel the need to accomplish their goals through war, and we do experience hatred. He talks about that. Clausewitz says it's impossible to conceive the passion of hatred of the wildest description bordering on mere instinct. So there's these hostile feelings that even the most civilized nations may burn with passion hatred of each other. And that's important to note, because if we hate somebody, then why should we negotiate with them, right? So if war is an act of force, it belongs necessarily to the feelings of people. And the aim of war is political, and also it's to disarm your opponent. So the political motivation for war is oftentimes to disarm your opponent. For those of you looking at the war in Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia, the one of the goals of Russia in Ukraine is to disarm Ukraine. Russia feels that Ukraine is a threat, and so they're seeking to disarm or create Ukraine into a neutral country so that Russia feels more secure. throughout its history, Russia invaded Ukraine 3 times. And so noting that is central. Noting that is important. Um, it's often the case where we believe that laws and international laws and treaties can help secure ourselves. But this is the point. Clausewitz also says that it's just a piece of paper. Treaties are pieces of paper that we only acknowledge if we want to acknowledge. So Hitler rips up treaties and invades countries. It doesn't matter. International law has no enforcement mechanism, and so because of this, as long as countries have militaries, they will seek to accomplish their political goals through war. But war does not spring up suddenly. It doesn't just happen, spring in the moment. It sometimes has this lead up, right? And it's never think that war is just somehow going to be a quick one, because oftentimes the wars that we think will be quick are never ever that. The results of war are never absolute. These things will continue to go on, and sometimes if you studied war, you realize that one war ending, another war, the reasons for the other war, the seeds of the other war suddenly spring up. And so when you're reading Clausewitz, make sure that you note all the different ways in which politics fits into. So the general will, how politics fits into the conduct of warfare. And so when you do the readings, do note the different concepts that I've plotted out in the study guide. I have one for Clausewitz in that it's on war, so you should summarize the reading because you will be expected to apply. You're going to be applying Clausewitz, and so a lot of please note that some of the trickiness of the questions come about because you're going to be expected to apply. So if we think that war is a political instrument, it's a continuation of politics by violent means, and if politics continues to exist, we can't expect that war will suddenly disappear. Wars will continue to occur because they are political in nature. And Clausewitz underscores that there are passions which break forth in war. And so when you study the different passions in Clausewitz's work, note that the individual human nature is essential to that. So going forward, please note those, the concepts in Clausewitz, but also in Rousseau, and be prepared to apply them to the best of your abilities. Thank you.